And we're off again. Okay, this week's lesson is going to be a little bit different. Make sure that you read it very carefully and make sure that you read the assignment very carefully, okay? Because it's a little different from what we've been doing so far. Okay, so I wanted to talk a minute about theme, even though we've already covered that topic. Most of you on theme did quite well. Some of you still tried to express the concept of theme in the stories in a single word. That told me that you didn't carefully read the lesson and you didn't carefully read the assignment, okay? In both the lesson and in the assignment, I stated the theme cannot be stated in a single word or in a few words. Theme is a concept that needs to be developed and delved into. Some of you didn't do that, okay? So again, I take time to put together these lessons and the assignments. You take the time to read them. You're doing more than just reading a story and writing a paper. You're supposed to be learning what we're delving into also. This only pertains to a few of you though. By and large, your essays this week were very, very good. And I have to say that out of all the weeks we've done so far, the comments this week were really much more developed for most of you. So most of you are really doing a bang-up job, really following on the right track. And most of you, grade-wise, are doing very well, okay? Nobody's doing poorly grade-wise, let me tell you that. Everybody is doing okay grade-wise, but most of you are doing more than just okay grade-wise. In my mind, nobody should get a C from me unless they really want a C, okay? Nobody's grade should be that low when they take a course from me because in my mind, I lay things out exactly for what you need to do. And it's only when you don't do them that you get a grade as low as a C. So, it's all your choice. I don't like to give grades that low, okay? C is average. Well, I don't think of any of you as only being average. I don't think you'd be here if you were only average. And I told you in the beginning, you inspire me by being here. Most of you inspire me weekly with your work. Some of you have been a little bit less than inspirational a few times. And so you still have half a semester to crank it back up. I don't want to see anybody end up with a poor grade. Enough said on that. And midterm grades will get posted shortly. Okay? So, this week is really very much a review week before we plow forward into my favorite 2 weeks of the two of my favorite weeks of the semester. I won't say my favorite 2 weeks, but 2 of my favorite weeks of the semester, which will be next week and the week after. But I wanted to review things this week to make sure that you have a good handle on what we've done so far. Okay? So we've talked about a number of different elements of literature. Okay? And so I encourage you to look back over the lessons from the previous 6 or 7 weeks and see what those different elements are we've talked about. I'm not going to say them for you because I want you to do a little reviewing and pick those out, okay? But review a little bit, make sure that you have a handle on all of that stuff so that we can move forward. Because if you didn't do the stuff in the back, then it's hard to move forward, okay? And then we've already read a bunch of short stories. We don't have new readings for you this week. In this week's assignment, I'll want you to choose 2 of the stories we've read so far, okay? Any 2, it's up to you. You'll be discussing how certain elements appear in those stories, similar to what you've done, except this week you'll be showing how 5 elements that we've discussed, and we've discussed more than 5, but I want you to choose 5. 5 elements appear in story A, and these same 5 elements in story B, and you may want to compare, and I encourage you to compare the way these elements appear in story A to how they appear in story B, or you may compare 2 of the elements in story A and B. They may be much the same, but you may contrast 3 of the elements so that they may differ from one story to the next. Okay, they may be the same elements, but they're used in very different ways. So you can compare and or contrast. But again, we're dealing with 2 stories and 5 elements that we have talked about so far. Do not talk about elements that we have talked about so far. Do not talk about elements that we have not talked about yet. For instance, things like symbolism. We haven't talked about symbolism. You may think you know a little about symbolism. We're going to be talking about symbolism in the future. So don't talk about symbolism now. A number of you have tried to bring symbolism into your essays, and again, we haven't talked about that. So don't do that, because we're going to go into depth on symbolism coming up, or things like hyperbole. We haven't talked about hyperbole, okay? Or things like poetic license that appear in short stories. We haven't talked about poetic license. So don't talk about things we haven't talked about yet. Only deal with the very things that we have talked about. Choose 5 of them and show where those 5 appear in 2 stories, and then compare and contrast them. So overall, as a class, you're doing very well. Every so often you can tell when somebody rushed through their assignment. That becomes very important, or very, very obvious. Every so often you can tell where somebody wanted to rush through their comments. But by and large, your comments and your essays have been getting better and better. The comments especially, people have been taking the time to really say something in comments more than just, oh wow, I didn't think that was really good. No, people have been going into much more detail. So if you're one of those that's been giving me those, oh wow, I never thought of that, you're not giving them to me, you're giving them to the rest of your class. And so give them more than that, okay? Say why you never thought of that, or how it's so different from what you thought of. We're only looking for 2 or 3 sentences in comments, but make those 2 or 3 sentences worth your while, okay? So, questions, you know where to get me. Now, here's your email question for the week, or your video question for the week that you have to email me the answer on. What 2 stories are you going to write about this week in your assignment? Email me and tell me what 2 stories you're going to write about. Again, by and large, you guys are doing great. Okay? Keep it up. Those of you who aren't doing great, and you can tell from your essays, and you can tell from my comments, if you're not doing great, then pedal to the metal a little bit, okay? And let's keep doing a good job. Have a good one.